Hey everyone, it's good to be with you. It's May 30th on Read Through the Word, and we are going to look at one verse today. One truth of virtuous living from our Proverbs. Proverbs is chocked full every day. It's hard to pick a verse, and you can certainly group some things together thematically. But in true word nerd fashion, one word jumped out at me. And it comes from the word, from the verse 16, the word gracious. And I can almost tear up when I think of this woman. And perhaps I've even mentioned her on another teaching before, I'm not sure. But I called her Miss Sarah in the later years. But in earlier years, when I was growing up, really up until probably I was married, I called her Miss McGirt. Everyone that knew her called her Miss McGirt. I knew her from when I was a little girl. She and her husband Paul and their children babysat me. They were older than me. She and her husband Paul lived down the road from us, and I would frequently visit their house. And Miss McGirt was the kind of woman that you wanted to go to the front door to see. She was the kind of woman who had the living room for the special company adjacent to the dining room with the velvet furniture. You know, you pushed it one way and it looks dirty, and you push it another way and it looks clean. In fact, when I was little, one of the things that I told her when I went to one of my front door visits was, Miss McGirt, you really should dust your furniture. Anyways, she was always Ms. McGirt, Mrs. McGirt. And she wasn't just Mrs. McGirt, she was Mrs. Paul V. McGirt. She honored and loved her husband. She was a woman of reserved words. What you would probably see if dictionary.com posted pictures beside words, you would find her beside the word lady. In fact, when Paul, Mr. Paul, I called him Mr. Paul, but I called her Ms. McGirt. I don't really know why, Mrs. McGirt. But Mr. Paul passed away, really. Of course, when you're young, older people all seem old, but he was young. He had a heart attack playing basketball. I picked up a game of basketball at our church, actually. Had a massive heart attack. And Mrs. McGirt always remained Mrs. Paul V. McGirt. It's on her mailbox. She never took off her wedding rings. She went to be with Jesus and Paul many years ago. But I just remember her. She smelled like youth do by Estee Lauder. Maybe some of you know what that fragrance smells like. I don't even know if they still make it. And if Estee Lauder is even still a cosmetic. I buy cheap makeup, so I remember that's an expensive cosmetic line. So I don't even know if they still have that line anymore. But her shoes always matched her belt and her bag. You know, that kind of lady. She always wore a suit to church. Even when pantyhose started going out of style, she still wore them. That wave beehive hairdo, you know. Yes, Miss Sarah, Mrs. Paul V. McGirt, was a gracious lady. And she gained respect. When she spoke, people listened. Because she didn't have a lot of words. She didn't just, like some of the Proverbs talk about, just running your mouth. She just didn't do that. I never heard her say anything bad about anybody. Even and I wouldn't as a child, but even as an adult, being around her quite a bit. And there was a situation I won't ever forget. There was a situation in our church that was quite scandalous in the day. And she had an opportunity to leave because it involved some people that she knew and loved. And several other people in the church left because of it. Not Miss Sarah. And the situation brought up righteous indignation and anger because there were some injustices. And as a young girl, I remember, young woman, I guess at that age, being really angry at the situation and going and speaking to her. Even as a young woman, I would stop off and see her because her house was on the way to my house. And I would just I would explode over this situation with her. She never said an ugly word about anybody. She never gave her seat up in the choir. She never left the church. She stood right there and faced it all. She was a gracious lady that gained much respect. And her funeral was probably, or celebration of life service was probably one of the biggest that the home church where I grew up ever had, honestly. Because she was a gracious woman who gained respect. She served you dessert on Wednesday night. When you went for Wednesday night supper, she was the dessert lady. And she handed you your little styrofoam plate with your cake or a little bowl with your apple pie, whatever it was in it, with ice cream. No one had anything to say ugly about her. Because she was a gracious lady. It gained much respect. And I've thought a lot about her over the years and how much she personally meant to me. And all the things that she did. She was our wedding director at our church. So she directed most all of our weddings. I was later in the group to get married, and she had already retired, but she came out of retirement to do mine and Scott's wedding. It was so sweet. So I thought of her. And I just had to look and explore. And I realize I've gone on a little long with this story, but it's my point. The word gracious there is hain, and it means favor, it means grace, it means elegance. And it actually says of form and appearance of a woman. I'm sure you know a Miss Paul V. McWirt in your life, in your lifetime. I'm sure you know one. I want to be one day. I'm far from it, let me just tell you. But I thought about her, and I thought about another verse that has the word gracious in it, and it's Joel 2:12, speaking of God. So rend your heart, not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and he relents from doing harm. Now that's not the same Hebrew word. I think it would have just been beautiful if it was, but it wasn't. But that word is hanun in Hebrew. And it is an adjective, and it means, it's used only as an attribute of God, as hearing the cry of a vexed debtor, of someone who is in debt and needs help. And I thought, you know what? They're really not that much different. Because that is the kind of woman that I know Miss Sarah was. She was kind and showed these attributes of mercy, and slow to anger, and great kindness, and relented in doing harm to those who were debtors to Jesus Christ. Those that were debtors, in need of her forgiveness. She was a gracious woman that gained much respect because she was committed to and imitated our great God. So if we want to be this woman, a gracious woman, and gain respect, not for respect's sake, not for notoriety, not for being all of that, but for being known, for being committed to and imitating our God, for being gracious and merciful, slow to anger, great in kindness, and relenting in doing harm to anyone. I'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.